in Southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pastures beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR.
New guidelines show it's relatively safe for women with epilepsy to become pregnant, but it's recommended they avoid the seizure drug valproate since the drug can cause birth defects. For more information on these guidelines from the American Academy of Neurology and American Epilepsy Society, visit thebrainmatters.org.
This portion of the upcoming amazing broadcast is brought to you by the law firm of Catania & Catania, award-winning personal injury, auto, and motorcycle accident attorneys, serving Tampa Bay families for over 28 years.
From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media, A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, your neighbor, David Gronowski. Welcome back to the program. We are live on FM and AM on our flagship stations here in Florida, also worldwide on our podcast and video stream, as well as our website on neighborschoice.com. And this is a week where people are celebrating Christmas, traveling, and of course the news is telling you do not travel, do not see anybody. We have no basis for this scientifically to say this, but we love the power trip that we have. We love the power of the state that is entrenched and increased in this time, and we will do whatever we can as the priestly caste that they are to stoke and continue to push a narrative of fear and blind hysteria based on no science whatsoever. And many people are excited to be a part of such a project. They want to be a part of a transcendence. And how else do you get transcendence in an age in which nobody is allowed to believe truly in something like a God, but rather you're supposed to find your transcendence in the crowd, that you're a part of a herd and that you stand out by fitting in better than anybody else. That's how people are told to fit in these days. You will stand out by being a most compliant herd member, better than anybody complies around you. And that's the way you try to get brownie points in today's society. We are in a crisis of undifferentiation. That is, we have lost all boundaries of identity, and now people are scrambling desperately to try to create these arbitrary lines in the sand for this thing and that thing and this word and that thing, this gesture and this action. They're trying to create a new normal. They're trying to create a great reset in which they can sacrifice the vestiges of a brick and mortar economy and create a digital economy in which everybody is surveilled, everybody is tracked, everybody is monitored, everybody is mediated by a very stringent new religion that you can see modeled in what we call the McWoke crowd. The McWoke crowd is a group of people that love to support warmongers. They love to support people who bomb people in perpetual state of war across the globe for financial reasons. These are a group of people that like to print money out of thin air. They like to destroy the purchasing power of those on fixed incomes and middle class. They love to vote for people who put people away their entire career, people like Joe Biden, 50 years of locking people up. That's what McWoke represents. It's not an Irish person. It's McWoke because it's corporate. It's corporate. It's cheesy. It's fake. It's fake cheese, fake meat, fake everything. There's nothing to it. It's paper thin in its substance, no nutrition. But McWoke offers you the feeling that you get to have self-righteousness and you get to have transcendence. And that's what the new religion they're trying to construct. It is an imitation of Christianity. They are trying to construct a great reset, but in trying to reset, they can only imitate. They can only imitate the real deal, which is Christianity, which is a concern for the least of these, which is a concern for the marginalized, the oppressed, the leper. And now they have a perverted version of it in which they can try to create a new fascist, a neo-fascist society in which big tech and big business, big banks and big corporations are able to mediate a kind of chilling effect on diversity of thought, diversity of action, diversity of opinion, That's not a good thing. Van Morrison, the musician, he and Eric Clapton have been protesting the lockdowns, one of the few rare examples of celebrities who actually say anything off script. And he says, remember those who are shutting down our economy haven't missed a paycheck since lockdown began. We are not in this together. And that is a truthful statement. That's why they say we are in this together, in this together. This is the herd mentality. This is when they all get in around the world for thousands of years, all cultures. You go back into the tribal times of every culture we have, and you'll see that pattern of paganistic groupthink kicking in. We are in this together. We are in this together, as they chant to sacrifice somebody to the god, right? They're chanting humba, humba, or whatever it is. With Germans, Norwegians, Japanese, any group you go to, they get into that rhythmic pattern of saying whatever it is that makes them feel in it together, but it's in it together minus one. It's always that way with statism. It's always that way with people who want to sacrifice to have meaning, sacrifice to have transcendence. They feel like they're a part of an ecstatic union with their neighbor, and they love picking on people. They love harassing people who are different because they're desperate for a religion. They're desperate for a transcendent other that they can say, you know what? I am in this together. I say everything the celebrities say. I say everything Bill Nye, the fake science guy, says. I say everything the TED Talk people say. I say everything CNN says. I'm in it with someone. There is a purpose to my life. I get to follow the crowd into the next voyage. Whatever it is Time Magazine tells me to think, I think. Whatever the corporate giant CBS and NBC, multinational corporations that they are, whatever they tell me to think, I'm part of that team too, because I am in this together. And they love that feeling. And that's that fake transcendent high that people get when they get caught up in a herd mentality to the point where they sacrifice some for the unity of a new tribe they're trying to create. All mythologies start in a moment of chaos. The earliest creation stories of around the world start in a moment of primordial chaos. That chaos is representing social crisis, a social crisis in which people don't know boundaries. They don't know order. They don't know how to respect people's space and status and belongings and relationships and all the other aspects that are manifested by the word difference. They don't know how to respect it. And it's out of that primordial chaos that a sacrifice is made, and therefore order is established. A great reset to the chaos is brought into place, and order is established. And the stories that we tell in ancient mythology are meant to reflect the justification of might makes right, the justification that it's the way we do things to find meaning. We have to sacrifice some to preserve and to reinsert order when chaos has spread. But it's not going to work because Jesus broke this system, because he said God desires mercy, not sacrifice. So the question is God the author of history or not? If he's the author of history, he will break any attempt at using sacrifice to create order. And that's why we're entering into a unique stage right now in history. In the old order of ancient history, we had times in which, again, there was a moment of social crisis when people lost respect for boundaries, when people lost respect for order, for space in relationships, for space in property, space in status, and space in people's personal space. And they get into a state of crisis, a state of rivalry, a state of contention, a place in which people don't have a sense of self firmly asserted. And it's when people find a sacrifice that they can say, we're in this together. In this together minus one. That's the heart of this in this together mantra that we hear throughout history. But now what's unique is it's not a state of undifferentiation, a state of chaos that has to be rescued with sacrifice. Now it's as if they're trying to sacrifice to preserve a constant state of undifferentiation. It's very interesting. It's almost as if they're trying to make sacred that which the ancient societies would always say is a time of chaos. They're trying to make sacred the idea that you shouldn't have private property, that everything should be rented or borrowed or shared or some kind of thing like that. They want to make it an anachronism that you have money. They want to make it an anachronism that you can have personal privacy. They want to attack and assault any concept of a decentralized political world. You cannot have anything to dissent from the EU. It's always centralization, right? If you dissent from centralized authority, therefore you're old-fashioned, you're dangerous. So there's a sense in which they are trying to consecrate and make sacred a permanent state of undifferentiation, which is a very dangerous thing, because without boundaries, without differentiation, people are going to be prone to more and more conflict, more and more agitation. That's why we have the saying, good fences make good neighbors. Without having a sense of order and boundary and difference between one another, it becomes very hard for people to live at peace with one another. And now, for the first time in history, it seems as if they are trying to, and by they, I mean those who seem to profit from centralization of government and centralization of business, those who make money on both sides of that equation. Now they want to, for whatever reason, I think it's because they want to imitate Jesus, because they want to supplant Jesus. Jesus showed respect for the least of these. And they use that concept of taking care of the victim, of taking care of the marginalized, but they use it as an opportunity to sow discord and create constant undifferentiation. I'm going to unpack this more. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll continue live on A Neighbor's Choice in just a moment. You can comment on our video stream. You can email me, hello@aneighborschoice.com, and we will talk soon after these short messages.
Who is your neighbor? Dave and Wally are team drivers for Oakley Transport. One day, they came across a very serious accident on the highway. Some might pass on by, but Dave and Wally saw there was no time to waste. They jumped into action and saved 2 people's lives with moments to spare. That's the kind of courageous love we need more of today. It reflects the respected culture Oakley Transport develops with their driving professionals. CDLA licensed drivers. Join Oakley Transport today for a rewarding career. Visit oakleytransport.com. That's oakleytransport.com. Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck on a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now. NMLS ID 1492187. Equal housing lender.
Do you despise lawyers? That may be the case until you need one. If you've been in an auto accident and need legal advice, go to the local attorneys that have served Tampa Bay families for over 28 years. Catania and Catania. They are family owned. They understand your needs with legal advice. When you need legal representation, Catania will care for your case from the beginning to final settlement. You won't need to worry. Catania will represent you throughout the entire process. Auto and motorcycle accidents are too frequent in Florida. If you've been a victim, contact Catania. They don't get paid if you don't get paid. Referrals on request. Contact Catania. Putting families first.
Offices Tampa, non-attorney spokesperson.
Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm David Gronowski, your host, and I'm going to give you an example of what this constant undifferentiation looks like. It looks like constant bickering over the smallest little things that become the biggest things when people don't have something deeper to be a part of. This is a story in Eater.com from Chicago Eater. Stephanie Izzard apologizes for a poorly received representation of a Korean dish is the title of the story. A photo posted Thursday using Izzard's social media handle showed a bibimbap, I don't know how do you say that South Korean dish, without any cultural context, igniting a conversation on cultural appropriation. A fellow Chicago chef is once again accusing Top Chef alum Stephanie Izzard of irresponsible cultural appropriation after she posted a recipe for bibimbap earlier this week on Instagram. A photo posted Thursday using Izzard's social media handle showed a bowl with beef and topped with cilantro and mint. The post, which has since been edited, was sponsored content created for New Zealand beef and lamb. Izzard issued an apology Friday morning. The dish, full of green herbs, looked more like a Thai or Vietnamese dish. At best, it's Pan-Asian, Korean-American chef Won Kim tells Eater Chicago. But it was not originally described as fusion. The post only called it bibimbap without any cultural context or sign of the dish's hallmarks, including the crispy charred rice from a stone pot produced by one of the dish's variants. In response to Izzard's post, Izzard, I don't know, I've never heard her name pronounced, Kim posts an essay on Facebook Friday morning sharing his experiences as an immigrant growing up poor in a small apartment in West Rogers Park. He wrote that he encountered racism, enduring taunts for bringing Korean food to school, and while grilling food during picnics in the park. Food gave Kim a sense of pride that he couldn't celebrate publicly until the white mainstream accepted Koreans, he explained. The embarrassment, frustration, shame I felt for something I grew up eating almost every day up to this point was something I felt shame for, Kim wrote. I would struggle with this for a long time. Kim's post never mentions the phrase cultural appropriation, as he shares stories about how his mother fed the family. Kim says his concern isn't about anyone cooking food from another country. It's just that white chefs with an audience have a history of mislabeling international foods, something that frustrates BIPOC, which is a new acronym they've created. It means Black, Indigenous, and People of Color. Like Kim, who grew up eating their favorite dishes almost in secrecy, trying to avoid racist bullying from classmates and other people who aren't used to different ingredients and the smells that come with them. Typically, is it supposed to be BIPOC? BIPOC chefs don't have the same opportunities to share their stories, especially compared to well-heeled restaurateurs who have a platform and can't share a dish without having a personal connection to it. The kind of imbalance was part of the criticism directed at all this stuff. A white chef can be seen as a capitalist, making money off of a culture without investing the time to understand the source of their inspiration. Black, Indigenous, People of Color chefs, on the other hand, often struggle to find opportunities in the industry and risk being labeled as lazy for cooking their own food. Meanwhile, white chefs are hailed as explorers for discovery. Doesn't it just sound like whining people who are petty? You ever hear this stuff? It's so pathetic. This is childish middle school crap. People are fighting about a dish. This is decadent. You want to talk about imperialistic hegemonic behavior? This is it. You're so pampered and pathetic that you are attacking people for cooking a dish. If you're in Saudi Arabia and you cook, say, a German bologna dish or something, is that going to be seen as different by the folks who are not used to German bologna if they've been used to eating their food? It's so stupid, these decadent brats. They are brats. Rich, these are neo-corporatist brats. And this is the kind of crap that a failing culture talks about when it has lost its sense of transcendence and beauty, when it has no binding agent other than to try to create all kinds of little little schismatic tribal assertions. Oh, you can't cook this food, or you can't because somebody didn't like the way my food. My last name, Gornosky, is clearly distinct and different. You don't think people have a being treated differently if you have an ethnic sounding last name? That's life. That's life. It doesn't make it good, but the idea that this is what people are scandalized by, they have to do public shaming and all this stuff, it's so pathetic. It is so nihilistic and indicative of a decadent imperial culture. And this is something that we should be very concerned about and we should fight against. Because if this is all we have to offer to talk about, it's either attacking people for reading a book in the library, which we'll get to, or attacking people for cooking a dish. This is the antithesis of everything that civilization has built, which is the idea that people can come together. It's only Christianity that has provided this opportunity for people to move outside of their ethnic bigotry, their ethnic tribalism. Christianity is the worldview that created the idea of a universal people, a people that can be called out of all nations, baptize all nations, and bring people together into an ecumenical environment in which people can get along in a peaceful way. And so they are operating, people who are into this McWoke new religion, they're operating within the scaffolding of Christianity, but they're trying to reinsert a pagan violent ethic in which they can push ethnicity as the primary means of differentiation. You cannot eat this food if you're not of this group, or you can't take a photograph of this food. It is pathetic. And it's a pre-Christian approach to treating people in which you have to try to segregate everybody, segregate people because other people say mean things or hateful things. I have to be mad if somebody takes a photograph of a Polish food or a German food or something like that, because if my background had any moment in which I had a difficult time because you have a last name that sounds ethnic or whatever, therefore you can't allow. This is stupid. This is a reversion away from civilization, away from what Jesus built, which is building an environment in which people can enjoy things together and not just normalize a constant state of petty bickering and quibbling over every minutia of pathetic ideas. This is what a society does when they don't believe they can cure cancer, when they don't believe they can go to Mars, when they don't believe that they can, have energy too cheap to meet and all the big stuff that binds people together. When you lose sight of any big vision, this is the kind of garbage you have. People fighting over photographs about a piece of food. Talk about privilege. That's privilege when that's what you talk about. You're mad that somebody took a picture of food that you like. It's just petty. And this is the kind of stuff that is indicative of a consecrated crisis of undifferentiation, in which people have so much in common. They're so similar. They're so close together. They have so much in common that they try to create boundaries or try to create a moment of differentiation through the most minutiae things, you see. They try to create conflict over, well, I don't like the way you photograph that food. Why? Because this is middle school, and we're going to be petty, infantilized adults. We're going to fight over the most privileged, decadent things we could. Instead of curing cancer and diabetes, we can't do that. That's what government does, and they never get it done. So therefore, people who worship the state, they're left just to fight over the most ridiculous, decadent questions that are a sign of a society that has lost its dreams and lost its binding agent, lost its story. So we have to build a story around this rubble. We have to be able to build a story that's true and beautiful and uniting of all people. We cannot allow this kind of stuff to be normalized, this mean girls middle school garbage. It's ridiculous. We'll take a quick break and we'll be back with more of the news on A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gornosky. My email, hello@aneighborschoice.com.
There is all kinds of lunacy going on. The madness of 2020.
Weekdays 11 to 2.
I'm just so fed up with these Democrats, it's unbelievable.
Get it straight from Chris Plant.
They're so hypocritical, it makes me sick.
It's the Chris Plant Show.
This has just got me going on.
And the left is waging war against the police in the United States.
Telling it like it is.
You should be thanked profusely for getting to the point. You're a voice of reason in the sea of idiots.
The Chris Plant Show. Weekdays 11 to 2. News Talk 1040 WHPO.
President-elect Joe Biden's received his first dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID vaccine just in the past hour in Newark, Delaware.
You know, this is just the beginning. It's one thing to get the vaccine out, and now Moderna is going to be on the road as well, but it's going to take time.
London's in lockdown after health officials found a mutation of the coronavirus. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson.
We looked at where the new variant was, where it was spreading, and acted to restrict it there.
The House and Senate expected to vote today on a COVID financial relief bill. Michael Cohen, President Trump's former lawyer, filing court papers saying he deserves early release from home confinement under criminal justice reform the president signed in 2018. But federal officials refused to credit Cohen for good behavior and for hundreds of hours of work and prison courses that he took. Chuck Sievertson, ABC News.
Our Neighbor's Choice returns. I'm your host, David Bernowski. I want to turn to this story here by Jeffrey Tucker in just a moment. It's a story on the American Institute for Economic Research website, AIER.org. But before I do that, I want to kind of just land the plane with that comment I was making about the crisis of undifferentiation that we have. It's so important that we understand this. When we lose space, when we lose boundaries, when we lose any real transcendence in the form of there is a purpose to life, there is a meaning to life, there is a way of living rightly and beautifully. When we've lost all that, then it's a free-for-all for people to scramble in a sea of sameness to try to reassert some kind of boundary, some kind of new holiness codes. That's what you see here with the McWoke religion. They are trying to assert new rigid boundaries, and they don't have faith, like in a sense of trust, with something outside of humanity. So it always has to be a religion that is manifested between human beings, creating a group of insiders that then attack people who are different or who are, easily marginalized in this new little revenge. I call it revenge of the nerds Christianity. And that's what we see today. Revenge of the Nerds Christianity. You remember that movie series, Revenge of the Nerds? The whole point of it was just that, look, what happens when the people who get picked on get to be the heroes, right? And it's violence and vengeance is what you get. But that's what you see with the victimism, with McWokeism, is an attempt for people to try to make sense and boundaries. But there is no repentance. There is no mercy. There is no grace. There is no tenderness. There is no forgiveness. There's none of it. They don't have forgiveness. They have ruthless hate and envy and bickering and covetousness. And so they're trying to establish meaning in a world that Jesus completely owns. But they're so arrogant, they do not want to admit that they cannot compete with the original. They cannot compete with the revelation of Christianity. And so they're trying to constantly push it back towards pre-Christian outcomes. So they are asking Christian questions, but they are asserting pagan answers. Do you see what I mean? They are asking Christian questions. They're asking questions and thinking about questions and subjects which are only possible in light of 2,000 years of the cross haunting our society. But they are resorting to pagan answers. They're resorting to tribalism. Well, we're going to make ethnic segregation again. That's what the McWokeism is trying to do. Can't take a photograph of a dish because you got Mean Girls theology trying to normalize shaming people for taking a photograph of food that comes from another culture. And they try to quarantine all guilt of problems onto one race or one gender or one this or one that, one capitalist economy. They try to dump guilt into a quarantined area. They don't want to admit that human nature is fundamentally flawed. They don't want to admit that there is a fallen nature to human beings, that we had a universal fall. And so they have to quarantine that feeling of guilt that they are saddled with in light of the cross haunting our society, in light of the cross making us aware of how we scapegoat other people. But they don't know what to do with it. They don't know what to do with those feelings that they feel. You remember that poem that Mr. Rogers read in front of Congress about why he wanted more funding from the federal government for public broadcasting? And it was, what do you do with the mad that you feel? The mad that you feel inside. It was a child's poem that had been written to him. And that's what they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do with the mad that they feel. They don't know what to do with the feeling of shame that they feel. And so they have to quarantine it into safe areas. And they feel as if we draw a line and artificially recreate history such that there's only one villain when it comes to genders, and that's males, and there's only one villain in cultures, and that's the Western culture, and there's only one villain when it comes to racial prejudice and hate, and they go on and on and on and try to recreate a mythic history. They want to reestablish a mythic history, and they feel as if they can quarantine that shame that they feel, that mad that they feel. It's both. It's both shame and mad. They're angry because they know there's injustices in the world. And they're also ashamed because they know they participate in it. When you vote for a guy like Joe Biden, who's been locking people up, that's got to make you feel horrible inside. If you have any conscience. When you vote for someone who had no problem going into Libya, no problem going into Syria, and you see the photos, and you see the rubble, and you see the ISIS beheadings, and you see, that's got to tear you up inside. And so you fight about Korean dishes photographed in Chicago because that makes you feel like you're a part of something. You get to vote for the perpetuation of violence. You get to feel safe that you're perpetuating violent sacrifice. But you then get to offload that guilt when it starts to prick your conscience that you know what you're doing is wrong. Because you get to say, well, I'm not the rich capitalist who took a photograph of a Korean dish. Or whatever else little minutia thing is trying to be established with a new holiness code. That's why this is happening. We have to understand this or we won't be able to make sense of what's happening. Until we understand that this is thoroughly a part of Christianity, we won't have any way of combating or figuring out a way to land the plane from this madness. This is a consecrated crisis of undifferentiation. And that's what's happening all around us right now, is that people are trying to establish a sense of order where you cannot ground order because there is no transcendent that lasts. You can make a transcendence about gender. You can make a transcendence about race. You can make transcendence about all these different things, but they're temporary transcendence because there are so many different factors. There's no end all be all, right? That's the whole point of this idea of intersectionality that they talk about, that there's all these different aspects of privilege and oppression that are all intersecting with one another. There's nothing you can ground. There is no transcendence with these identity discussions. You can't, how can one determine? How can one say, well, it's disability that is the highest transcendent? So if you're a white person with a disability, therefore you're at the highest. No, they can't say that because I say, no, here's a person who's not disabled, but they're of a minority race, therefore they're above that. You cannot ground it. You see what I'm saying? They're all, they're not, there's nothing transcendent about any of the different groupings that people are trying to assert over each other. It is a free-for-all of an attempt to ground and establish a new religion, but there is no ultimate other. There is no ultimate, okay, well, this will be it. It will be gender, will be the final transcendence that we establish the pecking order or hierarchy of right and wrong behavior about. Or it will be race, or it will be this or that. Because the bottom line is we're more in common than these folks who want to divide us by these external identity markers. We're more in common than they want to let you believe. We're in common in our goodness in humanity, and we got more in common in our fallen nature in our humanity. But that has to be suspended. That concept has to be forgotten in order for this new consecration of undifferentiation to take place. In the old order, undifferentiation was considered profane. But now, in the neo-pagan world order they're trying to establish, undifferentiation is considered sacred. And acts of differentiation in which somebody who is considered to be an oppressed person and an external identity marker, acts of differentiation are considered to be acts of violence. And that's why they say, if you take a photograph of a Korean dish, that you should be shamed and you should apologize, right? Because they're trying to say that you're differentiating. You're crossing a line of difference that we do not allow you to cross. And it has to be mediated by all these different, intersecting victim points. It is a very stressful, works-based religion. There is no forgiveness in this religion. But it won't last. It won't create a binding agent. It won't create unity. It won't create relief. Because what people want is they want relief from the guilt they have. They've been told there's no way there's a God, but they have all this guilt built up inside of them. They don't know what to do with it. If there is no God, who will hear their cry and their agony? Who will hear their sense of burden? Who will hear them? Who will offload them from the shame? We are walking around with pounds and pounds and pounds and pounds of shame on our backs, right? Carrying this big load of shame and resentment, and decadent solutions abound all around us for how to offload them. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work. We are becoming more and more aware of what Jesus was trying to get us to be aware of, but in our awareness, we increasingly find bad opportunities to blind ourselves again, to blind us again, to blind us from what we need to do. We are not able to suspend our religiosity. We are thoroughly religious. And the news doesn't understand this yet. But we are feeling it. That's why people like Jordan B. Peterson, the psychologist from Canada, have been so successful, is because there is a massive hunger for people to make sense of symbols and meaning and myth and religion. There's extremely huge appetite for it out there, because we have a feeling that the answers for materialism, the answers from atheism, are so weak and shallow, they don't even begin to scratch the surface of our humanity. Atheism has no real answer for why is it that all these cultures have these dying and rising gods. They have no real answer for why human beings are imitative creatures. They have no real answer for why Jesus' story follows the dying, rising God story in mythology, but does it in a way that inverts it and subverts it and destroys it with gritty realism. They have no answer for this. They have no aesthetic. They have no ethical answer. They have no approach to this in the atheistic, materialistic worldview. It doesn't know how to answer for these things. And so we're left squandering. We're left floundering, I should say. Floundering in a sea of sameness. And we're desperate to try to create difference. We're desperate to create pecking orders, because that's where we have usually turned to have our sense of self asserted, to have our sense of belonging reestablished. Our belonging is based on people that we can exclude, unfortunately. Our belonging is based on Grinches that we can accuse of stealing Christmas. And whenever we can't agree on who the Grinch is, it creates a hard experience. Because if we can't agree, and I'm not saying we should turn someone into a Grinch, that's the point. That's what Jesus says. Stop turning people into your Grinches to establish your sense of community. But we who become aware of the past experiences of us always creating Grinches and witches and somebody to banish, we always try to reestablish another Grinch, another, and another, and another, and another. And the only thing we can do is just to stop doing it. So that's what you see going on right now. You see this with the lockdown politics. There's Grinches everywhere. You see this with, the cultural appropriation stuff. There's an attempt for people to say, hey, you know what? I want to belong. And the only thing I know to do in my wickedness and my sin is to find someone who is worse than me and my neighbor. And we can all agree that we're not that bad if we all point the finger at the person over there and say, hey, this is the Grinch who stole Christmas. But that's not going to work, because there always will be somebody who says, I like that Grinch. That Grinch isn't so bad. That Grinch isn't so evil. He actually has a point. He actually, feels culturally appropriated or whatever it is. He feels exploited. He feels hurt. Actually, that Grinch was born of someone who was treated very badly, or that Grinch has a disability, or whatever it is. There's always something that people can look at and turn the story away from blaming or excluding the Grinch who stole Christmas. That's the purpose of all these stories we see in light of 2,000 years of the cross haunting our society. It's always us trying to we're always trying to grapple with the revelation that we can't agree on who is a true Grinch. That doesn't mean there isn't real people. There are real evil people, psychopaths and serial killers. They exist, right? But there's something about the way our society is in light of 2,000 years of Christianity in which it is floundering to find any meaning because it cannot agree on who to blame as the Grinch. And because of that, it's a free-for-all that will continue until we look at our Christian roots and learn to imitate Jesus and understand that scapegoating has no place in civilization anymore. So now we have to grow up and stop blaming other people for our problems. I'm David Gronowski. We'll be back after this short message.
Hello, this is David Gronowski with A Neighbor's Choice. I've got a mission for you. I'm a big believer in eating family farm-raised, high-quality grass-fed beef. That's why I'm a frequent customer of White Oak Pasture, a sixth-generation beautiful farm in southwest Georgia. Support sustainable, delicious meat of the highest quality. Ask for White Oak Pasture's beef at your local grocery here in Florida, or go to whiteoakpastures.com, and first-time customers get 20% off on purchases with our exclusive coupon code NEIGHBOR.
Are you ready to transform your career? Jess Smith was too. She was stuck in a job that was controlling her life, consuming her free time, and offering little opportunity for growing her pay. Then she found FinTech Mortgage Association, and she never looked back. FinTech Mortgage Association makes home lending simple, and they take care of home buyers like family. Using technology to make everyone's life easier, FinTech Mortgage Association equips each of their loan solutions architects with the tools they need to build a career with a schedule they control, a product they can take pride in, and an earning potential that is life-changing. Unleash your true potential. Join FinTech Mortgage Association. Visit finmay.com. That's FINMAE.com. You're in charge now.
NMLSID 1492187, Equal Housing Lender. David Gronowski here. Let me tell you about a man named Gabriel. Every day, Gabriel puts on his boots and drives across America to make sure our store shelves stay stocked with the food people count on. See, Gabriel served our country overseas. He knows that America stands for freedom, quality, and caring for others the way we would like to be treated. That's why when Gabriel saw food shelves getting low during the pandemic, he hit the road as a driver with Oakley Transport. In the land of the free, where no one should go hungry, we need heroes like Gabriel to help keep America fed. CDLA driving professionals. Join Oakley Transport today. Keep America fed. Visit oakleytransport.com or call them today at 1-877-8-TANKER. That's 1-877-8-TANKER.
Not ready to go to your favorite seafood restaurant? Get the highest quality fish for less? delivered straight to your door by Fast Fresh Seafood. Order our fresh hot snapper, grouper, mahi, and more. They're boneless, skinless, flash frozen the same day, and individually vacuum wrapped. Pick the size filet you want, the amount you want, and checkout's easy at fastfreshseafood.com. The best thing, every fish is on sale. Fastfreshseafood.com. Caught fresh for you, delivered straight to you. Stay home and stay safe.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gronowski, your host. Listener online, Chowhound says, if I have learned anything in 2020, it's that secularism is its own religion, complete with its own liturgy and dogma. That's right. But it's always a changing liturgy. It's always a changing dogma because it cannot be grounded. It has no final transcendence. It has nothing but rivalry. It has nothing but human beings grappling for domination over one another to assert themselves as the ultimate sacred in the light of the cross, making the most profane thing sacred. See, this is what the cross has totally inverted everything that human societies had always used as power. And now we're in a dizzying, we don't know where up is and down is because we don't want to follow the path of imitating the life of Jesus. Even those who, you can have a conversation on many things and have agreement. They don't want to really imitate Jesus in a real way. I've had people on this program, come in as Christians and say, no, you can't imitate Jesus when it comes to politics. Only Constantine will do, thank you. It's not going to work. Stu says, what's funny is that the secular religion being anti-spiritual is fundamentalist materialist, yet usually doesn't even respect property rights, literally holds nothing sacred. And Chris online says some people have to cut other people down to feel tall. Brand without clause says misanthropy is underrated. People apply arbitrary rules because they love authority, as it creates a false sense of understanding. That story is something you see in the headlines all the time. I want to get to this story real quick from Jeffrey Tucker on the, it's called Asymptomatic Spread Revisited. And, that's one of the reasons, why we're told that we all have to wear the mask all the time is because of asymptomatic spread. I'm just going to cut through some of the stuff because it's really good. But it says, the fog of disease mitigation indeed, but as with most of the science throughout this ordeal, it eventually came to be revealed that good sense and rationality would prevail over implausible claims and predictions that led to experiments in social control without any precedent. In this case, the carrier of rationality is a gigantic study conducted in Wuhan, China, of 10 million people. The article appears in Nature Communications, published November 20th of 2020. The article is Post-Lockdown SARS-CoV-2 Nucleic Acid Screening in Nearly 10 Million Residents of Wuhan, China. The conclusion is not that asymptomatic spread is rare or that the science is uncertain. The study revealed something that hardly ever happens in these kinds of studies. There was not one documented case. Forget rare, forget even Fauci's previous suggestion that asymptomatic transmissions exist but does not drive the spread. Replace all that with never, at least not in this study for 10 million. Quote from the study, stringent COVID-19 control measures were imposed in Wuhan between January 23 and April 8. Estimates of the prevalence of infection following the release of restrictions could inform post-lockdown pandemic management. Here we describe a citywide SARS-CoV-2 nucleic acid screening program between May 14 and June 1 in Wuhan. All city-aged residents or older were eligible, and almost 10 million participated. No new symptomatic cases and 300 asymptomatic cases were identified. There were no positive tests among 1,174 close contacts of asymptomatic cases. One might suppose that this would be huge news, Jeffrey Tucker says. It would allow us to open up everything immediately. With the whole basis for post-curve flattening lockdowns crumbled, we could go back to living a normal life. The fear could evaporate. We could take comfort in our normal intuition that healthy people can get out and about with no risk to others. We could take off our masks. We could go to movies and sports events. From what I can tell, there was only one news story that was posted about this study of the 10 million people in Wuhan. It was on Russia Today. I have not been able to find another one. People not following the right accounts on Twitter wouldn't even know about it at all. We keep hearing about how we should follow the science. The claim is tired by now. We know what's really happening. The lockdown lobby ignores whatever contradicts their narrative, preferring unverified anecdotes over an actual scientific study of 10 million residents in what was the world's first major hotspot for the disease we are trying to manage. You would expect this study to be a massive international news. So far as I can tell, it is being ignored. With solid evidence that asymptomatic spread is nonsense, we have to ask, who is making decisions and why? Again, this brings me back to the metaphor of fog. We are all experiencing confusion and uncertainty over the precise relationship between the strategies and goals of panoply of regulations, stringencies all around us. Even the rationale has become elusive, even refuted, as frustration and disorientation have displaced what we vaguely recall as clarity and rationality of daily life. See, when you hear words like fog, what is fog? That's the state of undifferentiation. You don't know who's who if you're in the middle of fog. You can't see anything. It's all just fog, right? And when you see words like confusion, uncertainty, frustration, disorientation, that's a sign of undifferentiation. But they're trying to make this a new normal, apparently. They're trying to make this a new way where you're just supposed to go along with the herd mentality. This is exactly what we see in ancient times when they would say, hey, there's a plague. And they say, yeah, we have to sacrifice this group that we've determined is the most evil and ugly and wicked among us. And if you dissented from that, you had no place in the society. You would be excluded and thrown into the sacrificial pit too. And if you ask people, hey, what's your basis for this? They would say, the gods have said. The gods used to just be projections into the sky of what the chieftains were always doing to maintain control with a little bit of violence to stave off chaotic violence. Now we see something similar happening here, where people are desperate, they're lost in a fog of confusion, and so they cling to a new kind of differentiation. Those who claim, by the power of science, I declare it reasonable to exclude freedom, to exclude school, to exclude going to the ball game with your kids, going to a movie, going to doing anything. I exclude your business from existing. I exclude your dignity from existing. I exclude your ability to get on with life without fear and shame constantly around the corner at every place you go. We see the same thing happening now because we're struggling and desperately trying to assert a new transcendence, but it won't work because as science shows right there, you know, they use that word science, but then the real science shows up and shows that the whole basis for their exclusion was quicksand. No asymptomatic spread found in a 10 million study in Wuhan. But it doesn't fit the narrative, so they're trying to continue to sacrifice and hope that people don't see the puppet masters who put on the play in Plato's Cave. I'm David Gronowski. We'll be back with Hour 2 in just a moment. But for now, email me, hello@aneighborschoice.com. We'll get to your questions when we return. Godspeed.